On today's Intelligence, as a dump stat, a dark sun sets on WOTC's desperate apology tour. Off the rails goes off the reservation. J. Scott Garibay is utterly delusional about D&D, shocking no one. Fosilised brain has petrified. And God of Ka loses to Condor DM on an own goal. Welcome, one and all, to Driving and Dragons. I'm Daniel, and I am here to mock the people who didn't stop to think before speaking out about TTRPGs online this week. It is a big week, too, because WOTC returned to the desert world of Athas and takes on the new Dark Sun, or Scorchers. While you are here, do me a favor and help the channel out with a like, a share, and a hype. I'm tracking after 1,000 subs, and with your help pushing the channel out there, I can start scraping together my YouTube pennies together, and I can eventually give away some classic cars. That also happens to be where all the memberships, Patreons, and Super Chats go. So throw a few bucks my way so I can bless someone one day. Time to get on with the show. We open up with the elephant in the room. The big news. What has WOTC done this week? Namely, 3 things that most of us never thought they would do, and boy, have they got the world talking. First, they returned to Gen Con in a major way for the first time in years. Second, they apologized for all the attacks they made on white guys in their basements, and replaced a lot of their team to push more quote-unquote old-school content. Third, they brought back Dark Sun. These all seem good, so why are they here on Intelligence as a Dump Stat? Corporations are not individuals, so when new leadership takes over, shouldn't we give them the grace of not holding them culpable for the sins of their predecessors? Well, yeah, we should cautiously take the new guys at their word and see what they do, but it's kind of hard when they step right out of the gate and make a hash of it. And I'm sorry, but glowing "Thank you, Gary Gygax" posts ring incredibly false when you still co-sign the libelous trash spewed by Ben Riggs, and haven't retracted your bullshit "this book may hurt your feelings because before we hired an unqualified androgynous activists, all the games were made by Nazis" disclaimers. Maybe you should reach out to the Gygax children who aren't on your payroll for some mea culpas too. You know, instead of parading Luke around like signing him to a supplemental material design consulting contract somehow makes up for trashing Gary and his legacy for a decade or more. And Dark Sun. Woo boy, Dark Sun. Let me tell you, I have always laughed full deep belly laughs about Dark Sun. Ironically, the most inherently leftist SJW setting ever developed for D&D, and WOTC spent years fleeing in terror because it had slaves, race wars, and eugenics in it. Kind of like most of them, you know, when they deal with that party they donate money to and call you a bigot if you don't vote for it and agree with them. Funny thing about Dark Sun is that regardless of your own political or social beliefs, it was well crafted enough that you could ignore the messaging just to enjoy playing it. Unlike, say, Strixhaven or anything else made by Wizards after Critical Role Campaign 1 dropped. All they had to do was convert it to 5e and pay appropriate respect to the setting and just let it ride, but they can't even do that. They have to change the artwork in idiotic ways, such as featuring a female warrior in metal half-plate with a comically oversized sword in a world where metal is so rare that a breastplate could be melted down and used to fund the raising of an entire army. Of course, in a hostile desert world where such armor would functionally be a mobile oven. You may say this is a quibble, but it points to their words being as hollow as their heads. We're bringing back Dark Sun, guys, but we couldn't be bothered to provide basic art direction to ensure the artwork actually reflects the setting. And let's not even get started on the blood and gore in the artwork. Go look at the art in the TSR Dark Sun books. It speaks of a harsh, dead world where only the savage survive and the brutal thrive. But there really isn't that much blood or even violence in the art pieces. Most of the art, including the covers of the various source books, feature solitary figures grimly looking across the desolate waste or standing beneath the brutal sun in open displays of their impressive fortitude. But of course, the woke-tards of the coast don't understand subtlety or inference. Oh no, Grim and brutal means that we need a Brunhilde girl boss taken straight from an early 90s ultra-violence era anime with some yellow and orange filters slapped over it. We need a dragon blowing people into dog kibble, guys. That would be edgy and grimdark, right? The only saving grace is that these Nimrods are so incompetent, lazy, and apathetic towards the lore that they're rehashing that they will likely end up stripping out most of the eco-terrorist whack-job commie subtext from the setting. Sure, it won't be as rich or as interesting or as deep, but it would cease to be a Greenpeace propaganda piece, so silver linings? Long and short is that while I give them the benefit of the doubt, all signs point to Wizards of the Cringe once again proving to us all that they're about as useful as a football bat. I guess that it is a good thing that they are eliminating physical media. So at least it's, whatever a digital download costs instead of wasting $60+ on printed versions of their failures. Of course, you could just take $15 and get yourself a copy of Corvid Codex Volume 1. Yeah, that's right, guys. Time to remind you that 6 writers and 2 artists came together to provide you with a TTRPG-inspired book that is actually worth reading. 7 stories, including one that could just as easily exist in Athas on its own, for your reading pleasure. The second revision has been approved, and as soon as Corvid Codex will be set for global distribution and available at all your favorite online bookstores as well. But getting a copy from Lulu costs the same and gives more money back to the gifted writers and artists who made it happen. So, get yours today. In the world of those who left WOTC behind years ago, we have some mental midgets this week. How about those wacky 4D role-playing doofuses over at Off the Rails Roleplay? Yeah, our favorite French-Canadian role-player went off the rails and straight off the reservation with his typical one true way. It's nonsense. Imagine if the whole story was the product of player agency. All right, sure. I guess having a toaster for a GM is one way to play. If your players just wait for their turn to ask what the GM wants and wants them to do, and then they get to roll some dice, your players are bored or bad. Yeah, I often get the feeling that these 4D guys haven't ever actually played at a normal table. Kind of like the theater kid version of the Bro SR, they base their entire view of gaming on a poorly constructed straw man of what was already a straw man argument, and have put so much faith in those arguments against them that if they ever knew what a decent, healthy RPG group looked like, they kind of forgot it a long time ago. It's like these fools can't grasp the concept that many players do not want that kind of play. They don't want in-depth co-creation. They want a world that already exists for them to live in and to explore. If they wanted to create a game, they'd be GMs. But sure, go tell them that they are bad players because they want to play the game instead of joining what amounts to a lengthy DM prep session. These 4D guys would need to co-create a pen so that they can go write the book that they all want to write by committee instead. What would this week be without some good old-fashioned J. Scott Garibay delusional HASBRO worship? Garibay was largely treated as just a sad soul to be left talking to his non-existent audience over in the corner, but then he struck a nerve with me with that intellectual abortion he committed regarding Earthsea magic in D&D. I am going to do a video addressing that concept properly, just FYI. As we all know, Garibay is so indoctrinated in the world of post-critical role D&D worship that what little brain function he once had ceased to operate when anything critical of WOTC or modern D&D is mentioned. Even worse, he's so desperate to defend WOTC that he can't be bothered to actually know what he's talking about before spouting off. Take this exchange with Grand GM. Grand pointed out that the people who inherited the premier nameplate of the hobby treated the game as something that needed to be corrected, to exclude the undesirables, and to cater to their chosen comrades, actively and intentionally refusing to coexist with other players. The hobby changing isn't the problem. The issue is them actively seeking to drive out large sections of the player base for reasons that have nothing to do with gaming. Of course, J-Tard Garibay can't handle this. This is critical of the almighty WOTC, praise be unto them. The D&D design team are infallible gods capable of no human error, and dissenters simply can't grasp their all-encompassing genius. Hasbro did not inherit D&D. They bought it after Lorraine Williams saved it from the financial ruin that was Gary Gygax. Hasbro has propelled D&D to heights that weren't even imagined by TSR for 27 years now. I honestly don't know where this nimwit gets this crap. Seriously, this level of stupidity requires actual effort, guys. Let's take a look at these fawning claims that Garibay made from his knees before the unsipped fly of WOTC. For one, Lorraine Williams took TSR over in 85 and promptly killed it. Yes, it was very poorly managed in the early 80s, but D&D as a game never sold even close to as well under Williams as it did under Gygax. Hell, even the basic set products suffered heavily under Williams. The fact is, the company appeared to make a turnaround with heavy focus on non-game products like novels and trade books, but that was very short-lived and was actually kind of a complete sham. TSR under Williams was never truly profitable. It would ship books to bookstores and receive the revenue on expected sales as an advance, and then treat that as profit and use it to put out more books. The unsold books would be returned, and they would have to pay the advance back, which they would do with the advance from the book that they produced their last advance. They robbed Peter to pay Paul for almost a decade, and the second that Random House cut off that program, the whole thing collapsed. Lorraine Williams didn't carefully fix anything. And what about Hasbro and these heights they reached? Heights so high that they alone can see the top of Garibay's nose, while the rest of us stare up it into the empty cavity where his brain should be. Hasbro was unable to match TSR single edition sales numbers until 5e in 2014. Under the ruinous and incompetent rube Gary Gygax, TSR sold over 3 million basic sets and 4 million AD&D core rulebooks. Then Lorraine Williams turned it all around with 2 million sales of second edition. But they could never envision the colossal success of Hasbro. No way they completely eclipsed TSR with the 1.3 million copies of 3rd and 4th edition rules combined. Now with 5e, they sold 3 million at retail and an estimated 9 million with all the modern internet distribution channels included. But let's do something that Garibay is intellectually incapable of. Basic math. Between basic AD&D and AD&D 2e, TSR sold around 9 million copies of the rules in its 26-year history. Roughly the same number as 5e, and more than 3 times as many as every other Hasbro D&D product combined. You can't make this shit up, folks. I simply cannot understand how one person can be this remarkably idiotic. And speaking of people saying incredibly stupid things in defense of modern D&D that could have been avoided with a few simple Google searches, we have Fosilised, a person whose screen name is apparently a reflection of the state of their gray matter. Now, this individual has all the usual hallmarks of a person who thinks feelings override facts and has the mental horsepower of a 91 Geo Metro with a blown head. You know, uses a combination of plural pronouns and normal pronouns, believes that they're an actual vampire. I use they because the profile picture is a poorly drawn vampire hunter D extra queer furry artist. Signs of, real intellectual stability and a firm grasp of reality. Well, you see, RPG Pundit was talking about how the new Greyhawk logo looked nothing like it should, trading the medieval wooden tavern sign look for a sleek modern neon palette logo clearly designed by a corporate committee to appeal to, kind of a alternative lifestyle club vibe. He said it matches a long-standing policy at Wizards of the Coast to move away from heroic adventure. Now, of course, old Fossil decided to inform Pundit that he must be in an echo chamber and that WOTC just doesn't flesh out worlds because in these games, players are kind of expected to do that on their own. This twit then chose to end by contemptuously asking, "Do you play 5e?" This is, of course, the tried and true, not for you, you aren't even a customer. You're a grognard who talks about 5e but never even bothered playing it line of argument that the 5e Homer crowd is so fond of. There's just one issue. As Pundit pointed out, he was a prominent consultant on 5e. He's credited in the early copies. He's responsible for large sections of the DMG and maybe even the entire reason advantage and disadvantage exists. I know that this is a very tall order for an 18-year-old trans furry lesbian who loves drawing shirtless men, they, them, she vampire who only lives with one straight person in their house, but at least try to figure out who you're talking to before you say something incredibly stupid. And by the way, we all know that the only reason that I know all this stuff about this person is Fosilised didn't spend any of that energy developing a prefrontal cortex and instead invested that energy in making sure that how they identify is plastered all over every single page that they can post to. How can you make sure everyone knows you identify as a badass surfer, Chad? By heading over to Patty's Fourth Wall Shop and grabbing yourself some sweet-ass White Dwarf summer gear. Our boy is doing it big, donating proceeds to Preborn, donating serious Riz to you when you rock the "You Must Be This Tall to Ride" shirt. Get one. Look good while doing it. You know what the only thing worse than watching a Condor DM rant is? Reacting to a Condor DM rant and making yourself look like a half-retarded hater acting in bad faith. Seriously, Condor is the easiest person in all of the TTRPG social media world to dunk on. So when God of Kai served up a brick, it was double bad. No one actually likes Condor, and for good reason. But there are a handful of folks who actively hate him with serious vitriol, and one of those is God of Kai. So here's the thing about having a truly vitriolic, active hatred for another content creator. 9 times out of 10, you're far better off simply ignoring their existence altogether. However, if you are going open season on them, you better be on your game. Come correct, and above all else, be fair. Because if you are unfair in your responses, all you do is make yourself look like a bitter, clinging hater. And that's what Ka did. He did a reaction video to Condor talking about Luke Gygax being a sellout and certain other gaming mindsets. But here's the problem. Ka was so eager to attack Condor that he spent significant time railing on the setups as if they were the point being made, only to spend minutes talking about how wrong Condor was and what an idiot he is for the reasons that were, well, identical to the points Condor actually made the second that Ka turned the video back on. To give a brief example, Condor would say something along the lines of, I keep hearing people say that if a game doesn't do something you want it to do, you need to go find a game that does. Then Ka would jump in with, homebrew exists for a reason, you dumbass. Of course you don't have to shell out for new books and new games just because you want to add something. It doesn't mean you have to buy new books. You just use homebrew. It's there for a reason. And of course then he would unpause Condor just for the bird brain to say, well, these people are wrong. You can use homebrew to make the game work for your table. Now, had he simply let Condor finish a few sentences before jumping in, Ka would have been gifted with a plethora of inane Stephen Saunders babble to criticize fairly. But because he showed very early on that no matter what Condor said, he was just going to excoriate him for it, he sent the message loud and clear that nothing he said in response to Clowndor would be taken in good faith, because none of it was going to be delivered in good faith. Seriously, Ka, you are now the only person in the history of the internet to lose a round against the chess pigeon, and you better hope he doesn't see it and reply, because your dumbass left yourself wide open to get bodied by the vulture, and even BC headache powder won't make that hurt go away. I'm going to leave you with this, because clearly you need it. Look at my reactions to Jenny D, Pointy Hat, or hell, even Condor himself. I have less than nothing for any of them. Jenny I'm apathetic toward, but Pointy Hat and Condor, if I ran them over with my truck, I'd throw it in reverse and back up to make sure they were okay. So when I do D&D Reacts videos to them, I am very careful to call clear balls and strikes and give them the benefit of the doubt and a fair shake. Because if I'm fair and point out something Jenny says has merit, or that she wasn't far off the mark, that allows me to go for the throat when she says something moronic without being seen as just a hater, at least by neutral viewers in good faith. Pointy Hat, DM Shorts, and especially Jenny D all have the stands who will jump in and treat something as simple as saying they aren't wrong, but they're seriously missing some much needed context as some kind of baseless personal attack. But that's a lesson Ka may learn the hard way if Condor responds and, well, never mind, Condor will jump the shark and look completely unhinged. Who are we kidding? Anyway, there were a lot of people who got a free pass this week simply because of the looming storm of failures of the coast, but next week there won't be a dark sun-shaped fiasco to hide behind. So I'm going to see you guys next time.